excited to have you here, Hailey. And the topic of your presentation today is Harry Potter and the process of individuation, an archetypal analysis of the orphan who lived. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I am so excited to be here and feeling a little anxious. So I'm going to start off with a spell. Just put some of my anxiety in my pensieve right now. My name is Hailey, and I'm going to start off reading a letter that I wrote to Harry Potter. Dear Harry, did you know how much you would impact my life? Let's forget the millions of other people who feel like they know you deeply. This feels personal. I had no idea. I was just doing everything I could to survive each lonely adolescent day. I have been getting to know you even better these days, and I am sensitive to the emotional landscape that we are in together now. I see so much of myself in you, and you in me. This idea you brought me overwhelms me. I can see now how huge and vastly consuming this idea can grow to be, how it was always there, and in the giant strength of its roots, I found the necessary nutrients to continue growing too. We may have been entangled from the beginning, but from where I sit now, patiently observing, it sure seems that way. There you were on the page, 11 years old too. I quickly fell in love with the way your story captivated me. The bravery, the honesty, the humility, the loyalty, and the perseverance you displayed made me emotional. Was I that way too? Or did I just long to be so? All I know is that you must have known some of my pain, not understanding the story of your orphaning either. So I am a doctoral candidate in the depth psychology program at Pacifica Graduate Institute, where our motto is Anime Mundi Colende Gratia, which means for the sake of tending the soul in and of the world. As someone who loves simplicity and origin stories, I was so excited when I learned at Pacifica that the root of the word psychology, psyche, and ology literally means the study of the soul. And it follows the psychoanalytical and psychodynamic theories presented by the fathers of psychology, the origin itself. And I'll read now a little bit more about what depth psychology means. And I'm saying the word depth, D-E-P-T-H, which is a metaphor. This is straight off the Pacifica website. It's a metaphor for the parts of ourself that lie beneath the surface. What is not immediately visible or measurable, but profoundly real. Think of an iceberg where only a small portion floats above the water. The majority is hidden, submerged, yet crucial to the whole. In the same way, much of the human psyche or soul, the motivations, dreams, memories, and inner patterns that shape us reside beneath conscious awareness. Depth psychology is a study of this hidden terrain. It invites us to ask, what is really going on beneath our everyday actions and emotions? What are the unconscious patterns influencing our lives? And how can we listen to them rather than ignore them? We see this every day in slips of the tongue, dreams, unexpected emotional reactions, synchronicities, and even symptoms as meaningful expressions of the unconscious. These moments often point us towards something unresolved, repressed, or yearning to be understood. As depth psychologists, we work to bring these parts into awareness, not to fix them, but to integrate them. So healing, insight, and transformation can unfold. So the story of depth psychology is much the story of Carl Jung. He, as the understudy of Freud, basically, was adamant that there was an unconscious or soul element, spiritual element to our personalities and to mental health. So Jung went on to study this deeply, and he discovered that almost all cultures, indigenous and other like, have a spiritual element ingrained in them. So it is with that simplicity and origin story that I began to ponder upon what I was even doing at Pacifica. Jung expanded the view of psychology by emphasizing not only personal and collective unconscious patterns, which he called archetypes, and he discovered that these archetypes showed up across cultures in all myths, dreams, and symbols. So, as people who love literature and who are writers, I think we mostly understand what an archetype is. And so we can give credit to Carl Jung for this. And as I began to ponder upon what I would do at Pacifica with my doctorate degree and what I would study, the orphan archetype spoke heavily to me. And so I want to ask you all to consider for a moment the orphan archetype. How many famous people are orphans? And I want to throw in the word adoptee as well. Orphans or adoptees, how many famous people? How many serial killers? And most importantly, how many heroes and villains in all of the literature and myths and symbols that we revere and adore as a culture? So just take a moment and think. When I considered this, I was actually quite blown away because the answer is a lot, or most, if not all. I want to read just a little bit here from a list. Maya Angelou, Jamie Foxx, Ella Fitzgerald, John Lennon, Marilyn Monroe, Nelson Mandela, Bill Clinton, Eleanor Roosevelt, Malcolm X, Steve Jobs. And let's talk about serial killers. Let's see, David Burkhoff's The Son of Sam, Ted Bundy, Eileen Wuornos. I can't say these names. The Boston Strangler, just to name a few. And so thinking about the orphan and the orphan archetype, I was actually again blown away to discover that in the field of psychology, the orphan, the adoptee, is almost completely left out. There seems to be no specific healing modality for these individuals, and yet they have extremely complex mental health. I'll read you here. UNICEF in 2023 said there were 153 million orphans worldwide, and that this group has a high and shocking suicidal rate of nearly 10 to 15%. So I did some simple math. 1 out of every 10, or over 22 million orphans, will kill themselves in this lifetime. I go on here in my work to say the suicidality present for this group can be psychologically traced back to the loss of both parental figures at birth. Nancy Newton Verrier coined this phenomenon and called it the primal wound. She states, sometimes the sense of loss experienced by adoptees or orphans becomes so overwhelming that it leads to thoughts of suicide, feelings which go back to the original separation between mother and child. Verrier goes on to quote Donald Winnicott, who calls the suicidality of orphans a phenomenological death, a phenomenal death. He states, what happened in the past was death as phenomenon, a solution by suicide, that is, by sending the body to death, which has already happened to the psyche or the soul. Verrier and Winnicott, I go on to say, seem to understand that the soul is affected by such a loss and helps describe how orphans' psyches, phenomenologically dead, must rearrange or disassemble to compensate for their incredible loss. Orphans are some of the most at-risk population in the field of mental health and psychology and in the entire cultural collective consciousness. Often, orphans are dual diagnosed with substance abuse issues, mood and attachment disorders, major depression, generalized anxiety, and personality disorders, alongside of their reoccurring suicidal ideation. Additionally, treatment for these individuals is hard to access and difficult to complete. Um, I'm defining an orphan here as somebody who's lost both parents at birth. However, I could add, as Massimilla Harris says in her book, Into the Heart of the Feminine, do most of us feel at some level like an orphan? Do we feel like we are in the wrong home and that these people who resent and diminish us aren't our real parents? I want to go on here to describe more about my research and how I came to this. I, the researcher, identify as an orphan. I spent years wondering about and seeking out my own identity. I struggle with many mental health symptoms that mirror Verrier's description of a primal wound, as I was adopted and began an intense grieving process at only 3 days old. I believe that my connection to a higher power, my reoccurring numinous experiences or spiritual experiences, my active dreamscape, and my deep love of healing myths about orphans have helped me cope with the mental health symptoms that of my primal wounding and have led me on a beautiful journey of individuation, which I'll get to further. I initially intended to research and study the dreams of orphans. My dreamscape is often reoccurring, and many dreams are repeated out in long sequences, much like a 7-book series. I hope to create children's books from the dreams I gathered. I intended for these books to help guide orphans through the process of individuation. I guess I will say a little bit more about what individuation is here. Massimilla Harris says individuation, as Jung called this process, connects us to the source of our evolving strength, wisdom, love, and other potentials. By embarking on this inner journey, we begin to accept our reality, healing ourselves, and opening the door for our true capacities to living. So Jung, upon discovering the archetypes, I can read here from James Hillman, he discovered that most every personality is essentially multiple, meaning that personality is imaginatively conceived as a living and peopled drama in which the subject I takes part, but is neither the sole author nor director, nor not always the main character. Sometimes he or she is not even on the stage. At other times, the theories of personality just reviewed may play their parts as necessary fictions for the drama. So Jung was adamant that we all had multiple parts, multiple personalities, multiple archetypes coming out and taking center stage. He describes that individuation, or a gathering together of these parts, was the path for healing. So I'll go on here to say, I felt called to the idea of studying dreams of orphans, but after learning more about my own primal wounds, I felt that working alongside orphans at this time would not be beneficial to my personal individuation process. My own primal wounding makes it difficult to hold orphans close as they deal with their own wounding. While lying in the dark, not dreaming, a new idea came to me. I was considering just how many heroes in my beloved myths as a child were orphans. And the answer is mostly all of them, but I immediately thought of my favorite orphan hero, Harry Potter. I felt certain that the series itself could be a demonstration of the individuation process if I analyzed the wizarding world like a dream. And upon this realization, a fire ignited in my soul. I first discovered the Harry Potter books while perusing my elementary school fare the year it was released in the United States, 1999. Upon hearing the religious librarian warn my religious mother that the book was about witchcraft, I begged her to let me buy it, as my soul had a flair towards the rebellious. I read the Harry Potter series more than 8 times as a child. Oh, right here. And it was my tradition for years to spend days rereading the series in preparation for my birthday and the next installment as they continue to fall both in late November. My first tattoo is a quote by Harry Potter, by the Harry Potter character named Dobby, the lowly house elf who betrays his own masters and endures much physical abuse to help Harry repeatedly throughout the series. My tattoo says, "What a beautiful place to be with friends," which were Dobby's final words spoke while dying in Harry's arms at the edge of the ocean. I wonder which parts of myself now sit creating this dissertation, and how many of my parts had to die in my arms to remind me that this is a beautiful place to be with friends. How many of my parts are actually and always have been my friends, and who've aligned themselves toward a brave fight for my own soul's restoration. My soul was deeply transformed with my obsession with this series, as it took me a step back from my own painful process and grief and into Harry's dream, where during a time my own suicidality first raged in my soul. I found myself asking, how can the Harry Potter series, analyzed like a dream, be used to guide orphans through the process of individuation? And could my work create a healing modality for orphans by using this beloved myth? I have just a few minutes more here, and I'm going to go on about how exactly I might analyze the series this way. I could look at Ron and Hermione as Harry's anima and animus, or his masculine or feminine figures. I could look at Albus Dumbledore as Harry's wise old man figure. Possibly Hagrid as the Hermes, constantly delivering messages, or even Harry back into the wizarding world. I could analyze Snape as the magician or the trickster. And what I'm especially excited to do is analyze Lord Voldemort as Harry's shadow figure. In the final scene of the series, there is a destruction of the wand that could grant Harry eternal life. Does this destruction symbolize how the orphan archetype can heal their obsession with life and death and come to a point in their own individuation which represents a more complete sense of identity? Harry stands next to Ron and Hermione, his masculine and feminine energy, having saved the wizarding world from the destructive Lord Voldemort, his shadow, also an orphan. Does this represent how he saves himself from some form of suicide? Does it represent how his soul is now more organized and how he no longer has parts of himself seeking to destroy him? Is this how the process of individuation might look for orphans? How exactly does Harry learn to integrate the parts of his personality and become the orphan who not only avoids suicide, but learns to thrive in his own unique wholeness?